anyone else. Hey guys, tomorrow is Ghost, let's start new story. It is time for the weapon handling and taijutsu portion of the exam. Make your way to the targets outside and wait for my instructions. Naruto sighed deeply and raised his head from the table slowly. Watching his nervous classmates start to file out of the classroom. It was better to wait until they had all left before he made a move. The last thing he needed today was to get shoved or tripped. He had to pass this exam. He couldn't afford any distractions. When the last person exited the room, he finally got to his feet and followed after them. He soon joined them in their loose lines in front of the targets. They were still whispering nervously to each other and he rolled his eyes as they shot glares at him. They had never liked him, not that anyone else in the village did either. Apparently having someone 3 years younger than them joining their class and actually doing better in some areas could be a blow to someone's confidence. They had spent the last 2 years trying to make him fail so he would get moved back down. It had gotten worse when their parents had joined in, but Naruto was stubborn. He wasn't about to let anyone get in the way of this. He will pass today and he will never have to deal with any of these morons again. 2 particular morons started pointing to him. Hateful looks twisting their faces. And Naruto raised an eyebrow back at them. Ren and Kichiro were the worst of everyone, and no matter how many times Naruto beat them in taijutsu, they never left him alone. He secretly hoped they got unkilled their first mission outside the village. That would solve a lot of his problems. Hideki-sensei tapped his clipboard to get their attention. You will each be given 5 kunao and 5 shuriken. The target in front of you has been divided into sections. So the closer to the center you hit, the more points you score. Your overall percentage will be added to the rest of your scores, so take this seriously. This could be the difference between you passing or not. Naruto clenched his fist tightly as the man's eyes swept over him at those last words. Hideki-sensei actually hadn't been that bad. There had been no active sabotage or intentional failings while Naruto had been his student, and there wasn't more he could ask for than that. He also didn't address the bullying or the stealing or the suicide baiting, but nobody ever did. Naruto knew better than to depend on an adult to help him anyway. He watched the rest of his classmates step up and launch their weapons at the target. Some did better than others and he didn't bother to smother his grin as Ren fumbled a shuriken, missing the target entirely. Finally it was his turn and he walked up to face targets, trying to steady his breathing. Hideki marked off Kichiro's score on his sheet, keeping one eye on the rabble of children as he scanned their score. It was going to be a good batch this year. Daisuke was in line for Rookie of the Year and Midori had already secured her spot as Kunoichi of the Year. Ren, Kichiro and Kaed were up there too, and Hideki would bet on seeing them in the Chunin exam sooner rather than later. His eyes fell to the final name on the list and his eyes snapped to the tuft of blonde that stood slightly apart from the rest of his classmates. The boy appeared bored. A stark contrast to the excitable children around them. The Kyuubi container. Hideki knew better than to doubt the fuinjutsu of the late Yondaime, and Uzumaki had shown no signs of it while in his class. But Hideki couldn't help but try to stay away from him. There was only so much he could do as the boy's teacher, and while he knew he could have done worse, he also knew he could have done better. He just could not forget what lay within the body, the destruction that the beast left in its wake, that horrible night still replaying in a loop in his head. Every time he told the boy to wake up in class or stop eating or pay attention, that orange fox appeared in his head. The boy was favored by Hokage-sama and Hideki had heard endless gossip about him, especially about his training habits. He wasn't really interested in his students' lives outside the classroom, but when he heard Uzumaki's name in conversation, he couldn't help but listen in. From what he'd gathered, all the boy did was train, running, katas, weights, practice dummies. He was so tired and bored in his class that it was hard to imagine the blonde having enough energy to do all that every day. He was barely going to scrape by in his written exams as it was. The boy was the furthest thing from an academic, and Hideki doubted the boy even knew where the library was. Despite that, Hideki knew it wasn't from a lack of brains. The kid was clever when he wanted to be. His ninjutsu too, the boy wasn't lacking in chakra. Quite the opposite. His henge and kawarimi were passable even if his bunshin wasn't. But he always got the feeling that Uzumaki didn't want to apply himself if he didn't have to. It wasn't the lack of ability with the boy, he just did not engage with the academy curriculum like he should. There were always 2 areas though. that Hideki could count on the boy to outshine all the other students in Uzumaki Naruto. Hideki eyed him as the final student stepped forward, grabbing his weapons. Hopefully his future Jounin sensei would put him in something that couldn't be seen for miles. Most of it wasn't bad: black shorts, blank sandals, black t-shirt, with each of the sleeves tied down with tattered white bandages. Then there was the bright orange sleeveless hoodie that the boy left zipped open. The boy had actually sewn on orange stripes onto the sides of his shorts to match. The orange clashed horrible with his mess of short blonde hair as it hung slightly over his sharp blue eyes. His gaze passed over the whisker-like scars on his cheek, but he abruptly looked away, setting his eyes on the target. Uzumaki twisted a kunai around his finger for a moment before he threw it, the other four following in quick succession. Hideki would always swear that the blonde's eye color flickered whenever he did that, but he knew it wasn't really possible. The container couldn't have a bloodline limit. He was a trick of the light. The kunai were removed and Uzumaki weighed up the shuriken. His eyes focused. Hideki saw the rock out of the corner of his eye, but he did nothing to stop it, watching as it was flung towards the container's face. He tried to convince himself it was good awareness training for him, but he couldn't help but feel a bit guilty. He knew that was only an excuse. He did make a note of the student who had thrown it. Kichiro was an excellent student, even with his slightly cruel tendencies. The small blonde snapped his hand back and deflected the rock with his shuriken, his gaze never wavering from the target. "I'd just like to finish the exam. Kichi team," Naruto said quietly. "You can try to beat me down later." Uzumaki twisted the shuriken in his hand one more time before he let loose, firing the next four one after the other. Hideki noted down his score, frowning at the boy's full marks. He had no idea how the boy managed it every time, even with excessive training. Any 9-year-old would still miss at least one. "We are now going to move on to the Taijutsu portion of the exam. Make your way over to the Taijutsu circle and do not enter it. You will be paired up randomly and no, you may not change your partners. Remember, even if you lose you still have a chance to get a decent score, but you should not be aiming to lose. Work hard. Remember your training and do your best. No weapons and no ninjutsu, that will result in an automatic fail for that portion. You will stop when I say so. Not when you think so," he instructed, guiding the rabble over to the opposite side of the field. The next 2 hours were spent grading the students on their ability to beat each other up with their bare hands. It wasn't Hideki's favorite way to spend an afternoon, but some of the moves that they came up with were definitely worth a watch. His class fought dirty compared to others he'd had in the past. It wasn't a bad thing, there was no such thing as fighting dirty. Only fighting to win. He was glad that they hadn't become stuck in the mentality of clean fights or honor, something that would get them killed once they graduated. He had to wince when Midori hooked her opponent by his nostrils, dragging him out of the ring. Excellent technique, as the nose was a vulnerable spot and could potentially restrict their breathing. But it was vicious. Overall, they had the academy taijutsu style down, with some variations from the clan kids. They all fought in similar ways that would soon branch out once they became genin. He looked down at his board and called the last pair up: Uzumaki Naruto and Ueda Kichiro. The two students stepped forward, already glaring hatefully at each other. They had some disagreements in the past, but Hideki could not show special treatment, they would just have to get over it. Uzumaki had to lift his head to stare down Kichiro, the 4 inches in height more obvious than ever. He was pretty sure Kichiro was a distant relation to the Akimichi. With his straight brown hair, stocky build and plain green and brown clothing. Uzumaki, on the other hand, was already small for his age. There wasn't a lick of muscle on his frame and Hideki was already mentally calling for the stretcher. He raised his arm and snapped it down, yelling "Begin." The boys did not bow and just fell into their taijutsu stance. The academy style, Uzumaki's was not. It did not look anything like any taijutsu style that Hideki had observed during his time at the academy. The boy bounced lightly on his toes, his frame loose and relaxed. There was a moment of silence as the boys just looked at each other. The other children had gone quiet. Uzumaki's eyes flickered again, but Hideki determinedly did not think of what that could mean. He was not there to figure out his students' lives, he was there to teach them the coursework and make sure they didn't die their first week as a genin. That was all. Uzumaki glanced down at Kichiro's feet for a moment before he smirked. Bringing out a small foam ball from his pocket and starting to throw it from one hand to the other. Hideki narrowed his eyes but allowed it. It technically wasn't a weapon, but he would be watching very closely. This move by Uzumaki threw Kichiro off for a few seconds, but the older student shook it off, moving forward to throw a punch to Uzumaki's face. Hideki couldn't help but notice Kichiro's eyes kept darting down to Uzumaki's hand, his eyes following the movement of the ball. He knew that was unavoidable, they were taught to take note and be aware of anything moving in a fight. He was just not sure what Uzumaki was aiming to achieve with this. Hideki was about to mark Kichiro the winner, the blonde doing nothing to avoid a punch that would surely flatten him, when the unexpected happened. Kichiro's right ankle gave way and he dropped heavily to the floor. He barely had time to push himself up when Uzumaki kicked in right in the chest. Hideki's brush hovered over his clipboard as he watched Kichiro get shoved out of the ring. The large boy remained when he had landed, groaning dramatically as the kids around him stared. Uzumaki lowered his leg and looked at Hideki expectantly. Ueda Kichiro has been knocked out of the ring, Uzumaki Naruto wins. He motioned for the medic to attend to the still groaning boy. He had known that there would be medical assistance required, but he had thought of the wrong student. Really, he should have known, Naruto was nearly unbeatable in taijutsu. It was so easy to forget due to his size and attitude. He still wasn't sure how he'd managed to get Kichiro off balance using only a ball. As Uzumaki made his way out of the ring, Hideki leaned over. You did not need to use a kick like that to finish the match. That was unnecessary violence against one of your future comrades, he admonished, taken aback slightly at the glare he received. I won, that's all that matters, the boy replied shortly, walking in the direction of the classroom. Hideki sighed, motioning for the rest of the kids to follow him. He couldn't deny that Uzumaki was right, in their line of work. All that mattered was winning. It didn't particularly matter how. He followed behind his class, leaving the other teachers to finish up with the wounded students. Congratulations to those whose names have been called, you have passed the final graduation exam and are now genin of Konoha. Come back to the classroom at 8 tomorrow morning to be assigned your teams. Those who have failed, come back in 2 weeks for the beginning of the new school year. You are dismissed, Hideki-sensei announced from the front of the classroom. Naruto stared down at the hitayate in his hands, running his fingers over the grooves in the metal. He abruptly shoved it into his pocket, as long as he had it on him as proof of his rank. He didn't need to wear it. He ignored the laughter and wails of his once fellow classmates. Moving to the door, he did not want to hang around the academy any longer than he absolutely had to. Uzumaki. He turned to the sound of his teacher's voice. You are to report to Hokage-sama's office tomorrow. Not here. He nodded once and continued his way out of the room, not bothering to speak to anyone else. He didn't have friends and he wasn't happy for any of them. He hoped he never had to see most of them ever again. Sure, he would be stuck with 2 as teammates, but that was only until the Chunin exams. He walked down the corridor, turning over Hideki-sensei's words in his head. Why would Jiji want to see him for team assignments? He weaved his way through the hordes of waiting parents, ignoring the glares and whispers directed his way. The occasional demon, Kyubi brat and monster floated over to him, but he brushed them away, shoving his hands deep into his pockets and gripping his headband tightly. It was hardly his fault that he got stuck with the giant demon fox that destroyed the village. It wasn't as if the yondaime stopped and asked for his consent to be discriminated against and tormented for the rest of his life. He had barely drawn his first breath when the Kyubi attacked the village, and yet somehow he was solely responsible for the ordeal. If he really was as bad as they all said he was, this village wouldn't be standing. Somehow he couldn't bring himself to be sad about that thought. Now he was genin though. It would be much easier to avoid people. He didn't have to be around other kids and he could avoid going into the village until absolutely necessary. They might even get missions outside the village. There was nothing that he wanted more. It was a good thing that Jiji gave him the option of graduating early. If he was stuck in that academy until he was 12, he might have started maiming people. starting with Kichi team and Renbaka. But honestly he wasn't picky. Now he just had to hope that he would get a Jounin sensei that didn't care about his tenant. He wasn't expecting them to be nice or pay attention or anything. Just the same neutral attitude that Hideki sensei treated him with. That was all he needed. Jiji would probably put him with a taijutsu specialist and he hoped Jiji was aware enough to pick a good one. He needed to work on his bloodline limit and improving his taijutsu was a good way to do that. No matter who he ended up with. He could just continue his solo training anyway. The real issue would be who his teammates were, he would actually be expected to work with them and be civil and Naruto could not think of anything worse. He had ended up dead last in the class so he would probably end up with Daisuke and Midori. The top in the class. They did not go out of their way to be horrible but he would still be uncomfortable working with them. He could never trust them. The only reason he was even dead last were his academic scores. He just didn't see the point of learning useless stuff. Which dead man fought which dead man centuries ago would not help him survive a bandit attack. Shaking his head of those thoughts, he finally arrived at his destination. It wasn't quite time for the dinner rush so it was pretty empty. Which suited Naruto just fine. He walked up to the counter and hopped on one of the seats. Grinning at the pair behind the counter. Tokaji-san. Ayam-nichan. 4 miso ramen please. Naruto-kun. Tuka smiled right back at him. How did it go? Naruto dug out the hitaite from his pocket. Dumping it on the counter. Tuka laughed and ruffled his hair before going to start on his order. I never doubted you. The owner of Ichiraku and his daughter were 2 of the 3 people that Naruto cared for in this village. Ever since Tuka gave that free bowl of ramen to a starving orphan hiding from the rain, he had gained Naruto's everlasting loyalty. He had been coming back ever since. A girl of 12 stuck her hand out and Naruto gave her a high five before she started making her way to the back. You showed them. Ayam-nichan called behind her. Tuka placed the first bowl in front of him and Naruto took a moment to inhale the delicious scent. I bet you blew them all out of the water. Huh. Tuka said. Turning to continue cooking. My taijutsu saved my ass. Naruto dug into his meal. Though I finally got that ankle break move to work and now I'm free of those bastards. I can finally work on making some real progress in my training. A flicker of sorrow crossed Tuka's face for only a second. But Naruto caught it. He was far too used to seeing it. Tokaji-san. I'm fine. I have made it this far without people my age and I don't need them, I can do everything myself. Tuka handed him the second bowl but Naruto twirled his chopsticks in his hands. It was an old argument between them. Tuka was adamant that Naruto needed friends and needed to learn to work with other shinobi, Naruto was convinced he didn't need them. That he would be fine on his own. Neither would budge on the issue and now that he'd graduated. He knew Tuka was banking on his new teammates opening him up. Naruto knew better. He ate the next 3 bowls. An uncomfortable silence hanging over the ramen stand. He stood and brought out Gama-chan. Counting out the coins carefully. He flinched as a hand came towards him but forced himself to relax as he realized it was Tuka. The man retracted his hand. A troubled look on his face. No need to pay, he forced a smile. It's on the house, consider it a gift for you passing the exam and making genin. I know it's something you've been wanting for a long time. Naruto forced a smile of his own although it wasn't as hard as he thought it would be. He knew Tuka cared and wanted the best for him. They just disagreed on what that best was. Thanks. Tokaji-san. He shoved Gama-chan and his headband back into his pocket and left the ramen stand. Hand once again resting in his pockets as he headed the long way home. He weaved his way through the bustling streets of Konoha. Pulling on his hoodie as he held an apple in his mouth. Barely avoiding a shouting villager. He ducked beneath 2 haggling women and took a bite. Switching the apple to his hand. Naruto didn't like being in the village streets, he would have been more than happy to take every dark, isolated alleyway all the way to the tower. He couldn't wait for the moment he could take to the rooftops. As an academy student, he'd been heavily discouraged from that route, after the 5th Umbu found him. He'd taken a hint. Glaring back at an old woman who seemed particularly annoyed at him. He finally reached the tower. He ignored the Chunin guards as he started taking the steps 2 at a time. Perhaps he shouldn't have fallen asleep at the training grounds, but it was too late to change that now. Gigi should be used to him turning up late. He still had no idea why the old man wanted to see him. It had to have something to do with his team assignments, as the rest of his classmates were being assigned to theirs right at this moment. He finally reached the top of the stairs, making his way down the short corridor to the large double doors. Most who entered the Hokage's tower would stop and take a moment to admire the carefully crafted interior. It was certainly worthy of the wealth and power that Konoha had as the strongest hidden village. Naruto had been in and out of this place his whole life, so he was immune to the intimidation factor that the place conveyed onto outsiders. Since he was around so much though, he was more perceptive to changes. A change such as the Chunin that worked in the tower actively avoiding the door of the Hokage's office. Some were annoyed, some were defeated, and some were scared. Naruto threw those ones a strange look. What could they possibly be scared of here? As he drew closer to the door he thought he heard something, but as he reached for the handle, it was silent. He poked his head in and tried to find what was putting off the Chunin. The office looked the same as it always did, scrolls adorning the walls, books stacked neatly on the shelves, the pile of paperwork threatening to topple off the Hokage's desk. His eyes were drawn to the Yandame's picture on the wall, but he shook it off. He switched his gaze to the Hokage himself, but his eyes snapped to the man's left. A man stood there in a tight green spandex bodysuit and woolen orange leg warmers. A bright red hetaie tied around his waist. He was the most colorful man Naruto had ever set eyes on. The academy teachers used to tell him off for wearing orange. But had they ever seen this man? He winced as he took in the man's shiny bowl cut and massive bushy eyebrows. Did he own a mirror? The tightness of the bodysuit did give Naruto a chance to scope out the insane expanse of muscle that lay beneath. His lack of self-awareness over his appearance apparently did not affect his ability as a shinobi. The man's dark eyes looked right back at him, probably doing the same assessment that Naruto had just done. Should I wait outside? Gigi, he announced himself. No. No. Naruto-kun, Gigi smiled at him. We were just waiting for you. Congratulations on passing the exams, with the highest taijutsu and weaponry scores no less. Naruto grinned, fully stepping into the room and shoving his hands into his pockets as he stood in front of the desk. No sweat. Gigi. It would take more than that to keep me down. Now, said Gigi firmly. I summoned you here because you will not be put into a three-man genin team like the rest of your classmates. Instead, you will operate as an apprentice, which is slightly different from your average genin. Naruto frowned in confusion as the Hokage continued. This is Mato Guy, an elite jounin of Konoha and a master of taijutsu. He will be your master and teacher until you pass the Chunin exams. Before Naruto could say anything in reply, Guy bounced forward. Greetings my youthful pupil. Volume. Guy-kun. My most sincere apologies. Hokage-sama, Guy beamed, his voice only slightly quieter at the old man's words. Naruto-kun. I look forward to training you and I'm sure we will reach the pinnacle of our springtime of youth. Naruto blinked in the face of Guy's sparkling teeth and enthusiastic thumbs up. He redirected his incredulous gaze towards his grandfather figure. What the actual fuck? Gigi. Guy is very energetic, but he is still the most qualified instructor available, the Hokage chuckled. He will be able to aid you in both improving your weak points and in developing your bloodline limit. Wait. So I just have to deal with him? Naruto asked eagerly. I don't have teammates. For now. No. You will not be placed on a team. You will complete D ranks on your own but may work with other genin teams if Gaikon wills it. You will be placed on teams for any C ranks you undertake in the future. There were an odd number of students graduating this year, and due to the rarity and specificity of your bloodline, it was decided that you need to focus on developing it and so would be the odd man out as it were. Naruto nodded along to the Hokage's explanation, but he could not hide his delight at the news. Gigi frowned at him and Naruto tried to school his features in something more neutral. You will have to work with other Konoha shinobi in the future. Naruto-kun, he stated firmly. Now, go get your picture taken for your identification and registration and then meet Gaikon at training ground 17 in 2 hours. A grin fell easily onto Naruto's face as he raced out of the room, slamming the door closed behind him. Well, his taijutsu and weapon handling are very impressive. Hokage-sama. If he could harness the incredible volume of chakra within him and apply it to his ninjutsu, he would be a most formidable shinobi in the future. His age, too, has not hindered him, despite being 3 years younger than his peers. His work ethic and focus is up there with shinobi twice his age. I have no doubt that with some guidance that he will be able to fully embrace the springtime of his youth. Go on. I know there is something else. Gai-kun. His mindset may pose a problem. He has not only been unable to connect to anyone his own age, but he seems like he actively ensures it. His happiness at the news that he would not be placed in a team is a red flag for a Konoha shinobi. He also does not engage in anything that does not interest him. He skated through the academy on almost the bare minimum on most subjects. If he turned up at all, the issue is not his ability or his skills but his attitude and dismissal of his fellow shinobi and villagers. Naruto-kun has not had it easy, but I believe you will be able to help him. Gai-kun. Of course. Hokage-sama. I will aid Naruto-kun to the best of my ability in embracing the best days of his youth. Dismissed. Gai-kun. Go and meet up with your new apprentice. Naruto scanned the empty training ground, trying to spot his new teacher. He didn't know if he'd ever manage to miss him. The man was loud in every sense of the word. Gai-sensei. Naruto-kun. He flinched and snapped his head round, coming face to face with the grinning visage of his new sensei. Naruto narrowed his eyes. He hadn't been there earlier. Surely a man with his volume wouldn't be any use for stealth. It is time to test your capabilities, Naruto-kun. Before Naruto could process the statement, Guy leapt forward with a punch aimed directly to his face. Only pure instinct allowed Naruto to duck, and he snapped out his own fist into Guy's stomach. The man easily dodged and they engaged in a spar. Naruto activated his bloodline limit as a kick from Guy shoved him back. He rolled with the momentum to displace the force and sprung to his feet. He scanned the Jounin and grinned. He could see every muscle, every breath, where Guy's center of gravity, where he placed his weight. Guy's elbow and bicep twitched and Naruto threw himself to the ground, avoiding Guy's grab and returning it with a sweep of his legs. Guy stepped over the sweep and aimed his own leg at Naruto's chest. He rolled to the side and rose to his feet, his forearm taking the next blow. He was taking much less hits, but as the seconds passed, it became obvious that Naruto's bloodline worked faster than his body could keep up with, even as his brain supplied the information and told him exactly what was going to happen. Naruto's limbs would not cooperate. It was only made more frustrating by the fact he knew Guy was holding back. He could see it. Every time he blocked Guy's limbs with one of his own or had to take the blow he couldn't dodge, his anger grew. His fist swung wider. Sweat poured into his eyes, and he grew more concerned with landing a blow than watching Guy's movements. As he swung his fist one more time, determined to wipe off that stupid grin from the man's face, he felt a sharp pain in his ribs. He blinked, and when he next opened his eyes, he was staring at the clear blue sky above. He blinked once more, unsure of what point in the fight that his bloodline limit had deactivated itself. His befuddled brain kept trying to make sense of what had just happened as he became keenly aware of his lack of oxygen. That was excellent. Naruto-kun. Truly showing the fire of youth is burning brightly within you. Naruto ignored the voice as he desperately heaved air into his lungs, his head light and skin tingling. Every breath burned, and only now did he notice that his limbs had turned to jelly from exertion. How long had they fought? It hadn't felt that long. Guy's face appeared above him and Naruto felt his annoyance return. The man didn't even look winded. The obnoxious man looked as fresh and lively as when they had first met in the Hokage's office only hours ago. The man waved a water bottle at him and Naruto sighed, hauling himself upright and regretting the motion immediately. The water bottle was dumped in his lap and he just stared at it. He would drink it after his lungs stopped screaming. Your taijutsu is wonderful, Naruto-kun. Closer to a Chunin than a Genin. Next you shall demonstrate the ninjutsu and genjutsu you know so I can get the full scope of your abilities. Naruto grunted, finally taking a swig of water. He didn't really want to do that, he didn't like ninjutsu and he hated genjutsu. Do I have to? He groaned. It's just the basic academy stuff. Not anything I'm planning on using if I can help it. Guy's smile remained unchanged. Of course. You can never have too many tools in your pouch. Naruto-kun. You can incorporate any of the skills you have learned into your fighting style. Naruto just poured the rest of the water down his throat. This happy, loud attitude was going to grate after a while. He stood slowly, shaking out his limbs to help regain the feeling. He threw the bottle to one side and flipped through the hand seals, producing a puff of smoke. Naruto raised his own bushy eyebrow as he stared deadpan back at Guy, refusing to look down at the green spandex that now covered his body. His illusion disappeared in another puff of smoke as he switched with the log, letting it sit for a moment before swapping back. Happy. What about Bunshin? Or Genjutsu? I can't do Bunshin, Naruto shrugged. I only passed because they didn't choose it as one of the exam jutsu. Guy's broad smile finally dropped into a serious expression. Show me. Naruto rolled his eyes but made the appropriate hand seals. Two puffs appeared beside him and he didn't need to look to know what would be there. His clones always turned out looking like they'd just been poisoned, at least they weren't missing any body parts this time. He allowed them to vanish as Guy raised a hand to his chin. And Genjutsu? I'm really good at breaking out of them, Naruto offered. Haven't met one I couldn't break out of yet. Can't cast one though. Never been able to. Guy was silent for a moment, a thoughtful look on his face. Naruto began to stretch out his muscles. He had to take advantage of the calm where he could with this Chunin. I will investigate that for you, Guy suddenly spoke up, his grin back in place. For now, we must address your weaknesses. Naruto flopped back onto the ground. You are excellent at taijutsu but I know you can improve. The main issue is your body cannot keep up with your bloodline limit. I saw you trying to react but your body did not cooperate. Naruto nodded along. He already knew that. Your mind works at a much greater speed that your body can keep up with, Guy continued. You cannot utilize the advantage that your bloodline limit grants you. Fortunately, this can easily be remedied by training. This is what Naruto wanted. He wanted some guidance on how to get stronger. His bloodline limit had so much potential but he knew he couldn't make it work on his own. There was only so far he could go by watching other shinobi from afar and trying to recreate it on his own. He needed a real teacher. One that would take him seriously and could give him some structure. He needed to get stronger or he might never escape this village. Guy was certainly unconventional but he might be the teacher Naruto needed. Guy watched his genin from beneath the shade, taking a rare moment to sit still and take things in. Naruto struggled with the box, his legs shaking as he dumped it heavily into the cart. The boy took a moment to breathe before he walked back to pick up another. They had gone to the mission assignment desk after their short training session to pick up Naruto's first D rank. There had been another genin team picking up their own D rank and Guy had offered to let Naruto tag onto their team rather than tackle a mission on his own. The kid had vehemently denied it, snatching up the first scroll offered and stomping out of the room like he was afraid Guy wouldn't give him a choice on the matter. The mission had been one of the more heavy-going D ranks available. A merchant was sending his stock to another village in the Land of Fire and required his cart to be packed. Guy knew this task really required a full genin team but he admired Naruto's burning determination to get it done himself. The springtime of youth had a chance to blossom beautifully within his young pupil but the boy was so closed off. A part of him had hoped that Naruto would work with that team. He hoped that Naruto would realize that it's better to have a team to back you up, especially on missions. He should have known his apprentice would share the same desire to push himself to his limits that Guy had. It would be a slow process, fanning and building Naruto's will of fire. But he knew the boy had it in him. He had noticed that Naruto did not wear his Hitai-8. When he had asked the kid where it was, he had pulled it out of his pocket. He had tried to explain to the boy that he needed to wear it, proudly display it as a shinobi of Konoha. But Naruto had only asked if it was compulsory. Technically it wasn't a rule that a shinobi should display it visibly, it was just something that was expected. Naruto had immediately shoved it back in his pocket, stating that he would have it on him as proof of his rank and that he didn't see the need to put it on his clothing. It was a bit concerning that Naruto had so little pride in his village, going so far as to dismiss what should be a proud display of allegiance completely. But Guy hoped he could show him that the village would have his back. It was going to be an uphill battle. Naruto heaved the last box onto the cart and turned to stare down Guy triumphantly. Another thing he had noticed with his new pupil, he was always ready to fight. Every time he had looked at Guy today, it was with a grumpy, challenging look that conveyed all the disdain he had for the world. The only time he had seen him smile and let his guard down was with Hokage-sama, and even then it was brief. Guy knew Hokage-sama was hoping that Guy could get him to relax a bit, to start letting people in. From what Guy had observed, that would be a more difficult challenge than the Sandaime expected. Guy grinned back brightly at his pupil, ignoring the obvious sigh and eye roll that emerged whenever he did so. It was only day one, he had time to break through Naruto's shell. He walked up to him, throwing him an earnest thumbs up before he met up with the client. He shook the man's hand vigorously, wishing him a wonderful day and thanking him for the opportunity. The client didn't return his enthusiasm, but that had never deterred Guy. He would always lead by example. He gestured for Naruto to follow him back towards the mission assignment desk to report in and collect their mission pay. The blonde trudged behind him, grumbling beneath his breath as they reached the village proper. Guy grinned brightly at anyone who looked their way, but their attention was taken by his pupil next to him. Naruto glared back at the villagers and Guy's smile faltered as he watched the exchange. Naruto-kun, how is your chakra control? We did not have time to go over the exercises earlier. Naruto looked up at him, the glare fading into consideration. The distraction was working. Shit. Guy blinked. Your honesty is a shining example to all those who wish to pursue the epitome of their youth. Sure. Guy-sensei. The kid's answer did help to fit another piece of the puzzle to the picture Guy was building. This might be the root of his issues with Bunshin and Genjutsu. He would have to investigate it first before he suggested anything to his pupil, but he had a good feeling about it. Naruto was the first student that Guy had ever taken under his wing. He had been inspired by Kakashi to take a student. He couldn't let his rival pass on his wisdom alone. It hadn't been what he expected. Naruto hadn't been what he expected. But Guy was looking forward to what the future had in store. He already had so many youthful ideas about how Naruto-kun could improve, and his taijutsu was only the beginning. He was only 9. 2 years older than Guy himself had been when he graduated. He wasn't set in his ways. There was still time for Guy to show him that it was for his benefit that he positively engaged with the rest of the village. A team could be as close as family if he was just willing to let other people in. Guy would just have to do his utmost to help Naruto bring out the very best of his youth. Kakashi flipped a page in his book, walking idly down the village streets. The genin team Hokage-sama had shoved onto him had been disappointing. No teamwork or independent thought to be found. He had sent them straight back to the academy, and now he was free of that obligation for another year. Speaking of obligations, he could already hear the familiar footsteps bouncing in his direction. He briefly considered disappearing, unsure if he was up for Guy's antics today, but ultimately just stayed where he was. He hadn't actually seen Guy in a few weeks, a rarity when the older Jounin was not on a mission away from the village. My eternal rival. Kakashi flipped another page in his book, his eyes scanning the words he'd already read numerous times. Sorry. Did you say something? You're so hip. Kakashi. Tears streamed down Guy's face as he held up a fist in mock frustration. Kakashi finally looked up to see Guy pointing at him. I challenge you. Kakashi. We must see which of us can do the most one-handed push-ups. Kakashi turned that over in his head for a moment. Could he be bothered with that right now? He was physically capable, but did he really want to? Guy. Can we not just see who can do the most blinks in a minute? His friend considered it before he grinned widely, his teeth sparkling. Of course. My eternal rival. What a unique challenge. Kakashi shoved his book into a pocket and turned his full attention to Guy. He stared into dark eyes as they waited. Go. Kakashi closed his eyes, opened them, and then rapidly repeated the process. As much as he liked to act like he didn't care about these challenges, he really did. It was just funny to watch Guy's reaction when he pretended otherwise. He would give each one his all when he did end up roped into them. He wasn't just going to let the older man win. Time. I achieved 157. Kakashi scowled beneath his mask. Maybe he should have agreed to the one-handed push UPS after all. 152, he reluctantly admitted. That is 27 to 28 then. Kakashi. Guy laughed. One more challenge and we will have tied. Kakashi whipped his book back out and put it pointedly in front of his face. Resuming his walk. Guy fell in step next to him and began to talk at his usual volume. I am glad I was able to catch you. Kakashi. My new apprentice has taken up much of my time, but I did not want my fellow Jounin to think I had vanished. Trust me. Guy, Kakashi turned a page. No one would ever think you vanished, we can hear you coming a mile away. Guy let out a booming laugh. Heavily patting Kakashi on the back. Kakashi caught himself as the force shoved him forward and he shot Guy an annoyed look that the other Jounin did not register. A thought occurred to him. Wait. An apprentice. He lowered his book. Is that why we haven't seen you in the past couple of weeks? It is nice to know you missed me. Guy beamed. I could not let you tackle mentorship alone. So I put myself forward as a Jounin sensei this year. I did not get a full team, but the pupil I have is excellent and in the springtime of his youth. How is your team? Oh. I failed them on the first day, Kakashi waved a hand dismissively. Kakashi. Was that really necessary? Guy's smile dimmed for the first time since they'd met up. I'm sure they weren't that bad. They really were that bad, he shrugged. The academy isn't like it used to be. Is yours actually good, or are you just being positive about him like you are with everything? Guy's grin returned in full force. Naruto-kun is indeed brilliant. His work ethic rivals my own and his taijutsu is going to be the best in the village one day. He has my full and complete faith. The name registered and Kakashi stopped in the middle of the street. Naruto. Uzumaki Naruto, Guy confirmed. He graduated this year and was assigned to me. Huh, Kakashi frowned. I didn't know he was graduating this year. Not that he knew anything about Minato-sensei's son. To his shame. He had avoided the boy, he just didn't want to be reminded of his loss. He knew he was letting Minato-sensei down, but the more time that passed, the easier it was to ignore the dark pit of guilt that grew each year. He had appeased it slightly when the body was a baby by watching over him in Umbu, but he hadn't seen the kid since. A lot could happen in the 5 years. He glared weakly at Guy's look of pity. You know, Kakashi, his friend said at a normal volume. It's never too late to build a relationship with him. I know you were his Umbu guard when he was a toddler, you do care about him. Just leave it. Guy. Kakashi brought his book back up. Eyes scanning the page but none of it sinking in. It sounds like he's doing fine without me. Kakashi. Oh. Who is that calling me? Kakashi said. Walking briskly away. I'll see you later, Guy. He was grateful when the other Jounin did not follow. Thoughts of Minato-sensei's son circled around his head. Long buried regret surfacing and the guilt choking him. He needed to go to the memorial stone. Naruto gasped for breath as he lay spread-eagled in the grass. It had been almost 2 weeks since he'd been assigned to Guy, and every day they had a taijutsu spar. He had gotten no closer to even winding the Jounin than he had the first day. It always ended the same way. Naruto collapsed on the ground, staring at the sky and struggling to get enough oxygen into his lungs. He healed quickly, but he was forming new bruises quicker than they were able to disappear. One good thing about Guy, the man didn't know how to hold back. He was more than happy to throw Naruto around like a rag doll, and he was delighted. He wouldn't get any stronger if the Jounin took it easy on him. He was already a bit faster than he'd been when he sat the graduation exam. If he kept going like this, he might actually make Chunin in a couple years. On the other hand, while all the muscle training and taijutsu was great, Guy hadn't mentioned Naruto's bloodline limit once. He thought that when he finally got a Jounin sensei, he would be able to make some real progress with it. He had figured some aspects of it out himself through trial and error, but he knew there was more to it. Guy sensei, he sat up slowly. When are we going to work on my bloodline limit? It's been 2 weeks. Like we discussed before. Naruto-kun. We need to get your body up to speed before we can bring out its full potential. Guy grinned. Hands on his hips as he stared down at him. We've barely begun your training, there is much more work to be done. I know I'm not there yet, but that could take months, Naruto frowned. Surely I should be developing it at the same time. All we've done this week is spar and do ranks. Naruto-kun. You are only 9, Guy's smile faded. Jumping straight into developing everything at once will not help you in the future, we need to develop your skills gradually. Starting at the basics to give you a strong foundation. You need solid taijutsu to even begin utilizing your bloodline limit to its full potential. What Guy was saying did make sense, Naruto understood where the man was coming from. He had seen it in the very first spar. His body was nowhere close to keeping up with the information that his bloodline limit granted him. He just had this burning desire to improve, he had to get strong as quickly as possible. He had such expectations when imagining what kind of training he would be doing with his Jounin sensei, thinking about it had helped pass the time in his history lessons. This had been both everything he had wanted and nothing at all what he expected. He didn't think he ever could have predicted Guy, but even with the early starts and late finishes, there was still that itching feeling that he wasn't improving quickly enough. He had never had guidance before. Especially with his bloodline limit. He just needed some direction and he could continue with it on his own. He had read up on other dojutsu when he couldn't find anything about his own and had tried exercises for the Sharingan and Byakugan. He knew that the library wouldn't have any of the good stuff. They were kept within the clan compounds. But it was a start. He didn't get very far on his own, that's why he needed Guy. Yeah. But I don't think we should be ignoring it completely just because of that, Naruto pointed out. It's all well and good working on my power and speed, but then I won't know how to incorporate my bloodline limit into my fighting style. Guy's face sank into a thoughtful expression and he raised his hand to his chin, stroking it thoughtfully. You raise an excellent point, Guy nodded. I will look into it. It is called the Emperor's Eye. Correct. Something uncoiled in Naruto's gut as he accepted Guy's words. Guy was already more dependable than any other adult that Naruto had encountered in his life so far. He still held some reservations. He had been let down enough in his life. But Guy hadn't done anything to prove otherwise. It had only been 2 weeks though, there was plenty of time for Guy to fuck him over. Yeah. Naruto took a sip of his water. There isn't anything about it in the library or the archives. But Chiji knew someone who had the same one. That's what he called it? Guy threw him an odd look and Naruto sighed. More than familiar with it from his former teachers. Yes. I do go to the library and no. It does not mean that I like reading or studying or any of that rubbish. I just go when I need pointers on my training or when something doesn't make sense. I still stand by the fact that the book stuff in the academy is useless out in the field. This answer seemed to satisfy Guy as the man threw him thumbs up, he liked doing that way too much. Leave it with me. Naruto-kun. Guy announced. Back at full volume. I shall find the most youthful training exercises for you. Naruto just continued to drink his water. 2 weeks in and the whole youth thing made no more sense than it had when Guy had first mentioned it. He'd learned to just roll with it, he was immune to much of Guy eccentricities through sheer exposure. Now. Naruto-kun. Guy clapped his hands together. Today we are going to work on your chakra control. Naruto sank back into the grass and groaned. He knew his chakra control sucked, the leaf exercise in the academy had been his worst enemy. He always ended up shooting the leaf far away from his forehead, which he had later figured out was due to him putting too much chakra into it. That knowledge hadn't helped him, he just couldn't get the right amount of chakra. It sometimes felt like he was trying to fill a teacup with a bathtub. That's not a very youthful approach to your training. Guy hovered over him. This will help you with your E-rank jutsu, you cannot complete out-of-village missions without them. Naruto blinked and snapped upright, bouncing to his feet. Guy had a point, the sooner he learned these jutsu, the sooner he could leave the village. He hadn't managed to get a handle on any of them yet, but maybe chakra control would help. He was willing to put himself through anything if it meant escaping this hellhole. Even just for a mission. Guy watched him in amusement, Naruto crossed his arms in response. Have you heard of the tree walking exercise? Nope. Then observe. Naruto-kun. Guy led him to the edge of the training ground and stopped in front of one of the trees. Naruto raised an eyebrow as Guy continued walking to the base. As if he was going to walk directly into the trunk. His eyes widened as Guy started to walk up the tree. How was he doing that? He was just walking up the tree as if gravity wasn't a thing. Guy walked along one of the thick branches and turned to face Naruto. Upside down with his hands on his hips as he grinned down at him. You have to teach me how to do that, said Naruto breathlessly. Right now. This is the key to the rooftops. He wouldn't have to walk in the streets and suffer the ire of the villagers. He could just use the window of his ratty apartment as his new door. He would be able to go weeks without seeing a civilian. The Umbu wouldn't be able to stop him either. He could just shove his Hitaiate in their face. That is what we are here to do. Guy bellowed down from his branch. He watched his teacher walk back down the trunk. A grin forming on his own face. Maybe chakra control wasn't that bad. Guy landed lightly in front of him. So in order to do this, you must channel chakra to the bottom of your feet and keep it up at a consistent level with each step. Too little and you will slide off. Too much and you will destroy the bark beneath your feet. Do you understand? Naruto nodded eagerly. He bounced past Guy and faced the tree. Channeling his chakra through his legs. He placed his right foot onto the tree and the wood immediately exploded, throwing him away from the trunk. He stumbled back, swearing loudly as Guy watched him intently from the side. He regained his footing and eyed the trunk. His smile dropping, so he would need even less. He pushed chakra to his feet, trying to make it the smallest amount he physically could. He placed his foot back on the tree and felt his foot sliding. He tried to gently increase the level of chakra, grinning as his foot stuck. He lifted his other foot. His weight supported off the ground for a brief second. He tried to channel chakra to his suspended foot while maintaining the level of the foot stuck to the tree, but he lost control. The wood beneath his foot shattered and he was thrown to the ground, landing on his ass. It will take time to master this, Guy spoke up. It will be especially hard for you, but I have faith in your abilities. Why is it hard for me? Naruto scowled. Is it cause I'm dead last? Or am I less capable than normal kids? The lines on Guy's face deepened as his brow furrowed. Of course not. Naruto-kun, he said sincerely. You have more chakra than the average genin. It's why you struggled with Bunjin and the other E-rank jutsu, you just put too much chakra into the technique. This will make you more aware of your chakra supply and how much you are using. Naruto was taken aback. He hadn't been expecting that answer. He was so used to people putting him down for the kyubi or his grades or his financial situation. The thought that Guy wasn't trying to be negative hadn't even crossed his mind. His answer also made a lot of sense. He hadn't realized that he was using so much chakra, it didn't feel like too much to him. Oh. Guy's face softened. It's okay. Naruto-kun. We can just keep trying until you get it. I will be right here with you. Naruto resisted the urge to smile back at the jounin. He turned back to the tree. Conflicting thoughts crowding his head. He wanted to believe Guy, but deep down, he knew the only person he could really count on was himself. Guy followed Naruto through the streets. The evening sun casting a warmth over the village and bathing each surface with a soft orange glow. Guy really did love Konoha, and he had never doubted anything he did in service. He would live and die for this village. The more he trained Naruto and got to know his student, the more questions he had. There were so many red flags popping up around the boy, and Guy did not like it. That comment he made about being less. He had automatically jumped to the defensive, had expected to be put down and disregarded. What kind of schooling did he receive to think like that? There was also the surprise that appeared on his face every time Guy encouraged him to learn and expand on things that were not immediately useful. Naruto could be very intense in his training, pushing himself like his very life depended on it. Other times, like when he mentioned ninjutsu or genjutsu, Naruto rolled his eyes and didn't even try to pretend he was interested. It was as if the genin thought that he was alone, thinking Guy was only there temporarily, so he had to fit the pieces together by himself. Guy looked forward to showing his student that he was there for him. He was there to help him reach his potential and flourish in the springtime of his youth. There was a burning passion beneath the surface and Guy wanted to help Naruto realize it was okay to embrace it. He caught a few villagers looking their way and he beamed cheerfully at them in greeting, but they weren't looking at him. Their eyes were latched onto the small blonde boy just in front of him and Guy was surprised at the venom. People who usually smiled when he saw them were twisted up in hatred. Their faces almost unrecognizable. He shot a glance at Naruto and found a matching glare as he gave as good as he got. Guy had always overheard talk of Naruto, it was hard not to in a village like this. He hadn't really taken it seriously. He didn't agree with the negative comments and he was not about to think the worst of a boy he had never met. Now he had gotten to know Naruto. He was even less inclined to agree. His student was a hard worker and while he was on the grumpy side, his youth and passion was clear for anyone to see. He hadn't stopped to consider what kind of effect those comments would have on the kid himself. Naruto tore his gaze away from the villagers as he spotted their destination in the distance. A smile almost broke across the genin's face as he picked up the pace, almost skipping to the ramen stand. Guy followed, taking a seat next to his pupil and smiling at the ramen stand owner. Naruto. The man grinned. Who do you have with you today? Guy hid his surprise as Naruto smiled openly, his blue eyes sparkling. This is Guy-sensei. He easily replied. He's treating me to ramen today. The ramen chef turned to Guy in mock sympathy. I hope you have a deep pocket. Guy-san, he said. This kid can really pack it away, I'm pretty sure his blood is part ramen broth at this point. Guy beamed at the chef as Naruto threw out an embarrassed Tokaji-san. This was the most animated Naruto had been in the 2 weeks they had been training together. It was a nice change to see his student smiling rather than sporting the usual scowl he wore while completing missions. What would you like? Guy-san. Took a turn to start cooking. Naruto always gets miso ramen so I just need your order. Vegetable ramen. Please. Tuka-san. Tuka nodded to them and focused on what he was doing. Guy glanced over at Naruto and decided to ask a question that had been on his mind since he learned that Naruto did not wear his Hitai. Naruto-kun. Why do you want to be a shinobi? Naruto's smile fell and his brow furrowed. I owe it to Jiji, he helped me when I was younger and I want to repay him. I want to get to the point where I don't have to debate whether I can afford an apple. I want to master my bloodline limit, I don't want it to go to waste. Guy listened quietly. There was something else. Naruto kept throwing nervous glances at him so Guy kept his body relaxed, trying to project acceptance and patience. It wasn't often that he tried to be quiet and tone himself down. But this felt important. He wanted Naruto to know he could trust him. I want to leave the village, Naruto admitted quietly. I want to get to the level where I can just leave and not get hunted down for it. The Sunin can do whatever they want, if I can get strong enough. I can do it too. Naruto stared down at his hands, twisting his fingers together. Guy could understand his nervousness, shinobi generally did not have that goal. Guy himself could not imagine ever leaving Konoha except for missions. It was his home, it was where his heart and soul lived. For someone to say they wished to leave without the intent to return, it bordered on treason. He already knew that Naruto held no loyalty towards Konoha. That was obvious within the first hour of meeting him. But he could understand why. That's an admirable goal, Naruto-kun. To aim for that level of strength. Guy patted his shoulder gently. I will support you however I can. As Naruto snapped round to stare at him, his blue eyes wide in shock. Guy grinned at him. He meant what he said. Guy would help Naruto reach the epitome of his youth and accomplish all his goals. That was what he was here to do as a Jounin sensei. He hoped Naruto would change his mind, that by the time he reached the level of the Sunin he would find a reason to stay. Naruto walked out of the administration building, finished for the day after a gardening D rank. He may have been done with Guy for the day but he had every intention of going straight to the training grounds. In the month since he was shown the tree walking exercise, he had only made it halfway up the trunk. Guy had been nothing but accepting and encouraging but it was really starting to annoy Naruto. He would get to the top of that tree if it killed him. Guy had really surprised him. He had taken a chance telling the Jounin the real reason he became a shinobi. He knew that it was practically treason, the only thing worse was leaving and becoming a missing nin. Naruto had considered that when he was younger, but he knew it was wishful thinking. They would never let him go, the hunter nin would find him within a day and then he'd be even more restricted. By conforming to the system, he at least would be able to leave on missions. He would take anything at this point. His sensei had just accepted it like it was no big deal. Beneath the spandex and youth, Guy was a lot more thoughtful than he let on. It was so easy to be fooled into thinking he was just a cheerful, loud, obnoxious character who yells about youth and challenges himself all the time. Guy was all of those things, but there was a brain beneath that bowl cut. Well, if it isn't the dead last. Haven't been sent back to the academy yet. Naruto closed his eyes, heaving a deep sigh. 6 weeks. 6 glorious weeks. Of avoiding his former classmates. He hadn't seen a single genin from his class and it had been fantastic. There had almost been a weight lifted, he could through his day without being insulted and put down. The villagers threw him dirty looks, but at least they kept to themselves. He opened his eyes and turned to face them, folding his arms. Kichi team. Don't tell me you passed, he goaded. Don't you need brains to be a genin? Or did they just pass you to use as a grunt? They didn't even waste a team on you, scoffed Ren. They must not think you're going to last that long. Or maybe they knew that anyone from the academy would only hold me back, Naruto smirked. He always enjoyed that shade of purple on Kichi team's face. Midori hung back a few steps from the two boys. She had never given him trouble, but she also ignored him completely. She refused to look at him even now. He wondered how she was managing on a team with those two terrors. She was probably getting what she deserved. Please. Like anyone could stand to be around a demon, Ren jeered. If I really was a demon, Naruto rolled his eyes. Do you think you would still be breathing? His grin was all teeth as he watched a flicker of fear pass over their faces. You can't touch us, Ren swallowed, failing to put on a brave face. You're just talking shit. You can't do anything here. Naruto shrugged. True, he agreed casually. I can't touch a hair on your heads while we're in the village. On a mission. Though. Those enemy shinobi are tricky. You make one mistake and you're dead before you even realize what happened. He watched the dawning realization on their faces and he turned, waving a hand before shoving them into his pockets. He stopped as Kichiro called out behind him. You talk a big game, dead last. But you're the one no one will miss when you are killed on your first mission. Your own parents killed themselves just so they could get away from you. The words struck his heart with the force of a kunai. The anger washed over him, leaving a hollow feeling in his gut. He whipped around in fury, watching them laugh as they walked into the Hokage's tower. That had always been the worst insult they could throw at him. They had done it once before in the academy and Naruto had almost maimed one of them. After narrowly escaping expulsion, they had made the same comment. They knew he couldn't attack them again. He couldn't risk getting thrown out of the academy, so he responded with pranks. While frowned upon, there was no serious punishment for those. After the third shaved head, the class had learned not to bring up his parents. It seemed that they thought they were safe since they weren't in the academy anymore. Naruto turned back around, his steps fueled with hatred and fury as he began to think up ideas for revenge. They thought they were safe now, he would just have to remind them exactly who they were dealing with. Guy scanned the mostly empty Jounin standby station. He finally spotted the man he'd been looking for, sitting by one of the windows and slumping into the red sofa. Kakashi had been avoiding him since he found out Naruto was Guy's apprentice and Guy had given him his space. He knew how hard Kakashi took the loss of his team and he had all but vanished into Umbu when Yondaime-sama died. It had taken almost a decade to get him back and he knew that was only because the Sandaime hadn't given him a choice. However, he'd given his friend enough time to wallow, his rival needed to pick himself back up and face things head on. Guy had just the thing to help him do that. My eternal rival. He made it a point to ignore the way Kakashi shrunk into himself at the sound of his voice. His rival was simply having a bad day. I am glad to have found you. He grinned. I have a favor I need to ask of you. Kakashi lowered his book slightly as he stared deadpan back at Guy. To the outside observer, Kakashi looked as relaxed and unaffected as he always did. Guy knew better, Kakashi obviously hadn't been sleeping. The lines of his frame were tense and he knew there was a deep frown hidden beneath that mask. Hopefully Guy's proposition would help him out of his own head. Guy, said Kakashi with a flat voice. I'm kinda busy right now. Can I take a rain check? Kakashi. You need to engage with life. Reach the springtime of your youth. You cannot hide in your book forever. Watch me, Kakashi mumbled under his breath. I need your help with my young pupil. Guy continued. He wishes to work on his dojutsu and with your experience with the Sharingan. I know you would be the perfect mentor to help him to achieve the prime of his youth. Kakashi dropped the book into his lap, leaning forward to actively stare at Guy. He inherited the Emperor's eye. Indeed. Although I was not aware it was named as such. Yondaime-sama kept it close to his chest. Most of Konoha do not know he even had a bloodline limit. Does Naruto know? He does not speak of his personal life, but he is smart. I do not doubt that he has figured it out. Kakashi slumped back in his seat. Shit. Kakashi. You are the best person in the village to help him harness it, Guy insisted. You have your own experience and skill with your own bloodline limit, and you saw the Emperor's eye up close when you trained under the Yondaime. He could feel his rival wavering and he grinned. This would be a fantastic partnership not only for the genin, but Kakashi too. Before the other jounin could answer, a voice called out from behind them. Guy. He turned to see one of the other jounin sensei approaching. His expression thunderous as he stomped over to them. You need to tighten your leash on the Kyuubi brat. Guy's grin fell. I am not sure what you mean. Hayama. I do not have Naruto on a leash. Obviously, Hayama scoffed. You fucking need one. That brat needs some sort of fucking discipline, and if you don't give it to him, someone else will. The threat registered and Guy narrowed his eyes. His usual cheerful demeanor absent. Naruto is my apprentice. Hayama. And he is my responsibility. He does not deserve this kind of treatment, and I assure you, if you place a finger on him, I will take my own decisive action. Shirakumo Hayama was an excellent jounin and Guy had worked well with him in the past. The man was usually calm and collected. He was the one who carefully assessed the situations on missions and decided on the appropriate course of action. He had never seen the man lose his temper like this. His gray hair was falling out of his high ponytail and his uniform was rumpled. What did Naruto do? Kakashi spoke up, breaking their impromptu staring contest. He traumatized my genin is what he did. Hayama threw up his arms in frustration. Midori won't leave her house and Ren and Kichiro won't talk to me. They won't talk to anyone. How do you know Naruto was responsible? Someone mentioned his name around Kichiro and the kid flinched so hard he fell off his bed. I did the same with the other two and they had the same reaction. That isn't a coincidence. Do you know what he did? Guy asked quietly. I think it was some sort of prank gone wrong. Hayama ran a hand through his hair, loosening his ponytail further. Naruto did plenty of them while he was in the academy, but he's a genin now. It's unacceptable. Guy. What did they do to him? They both turned to Kakashi as he rose to his feet. I don't know, Hayama sighed. They really don't like him, but I can't imagine them doing anything to warrant this level of retaliation. This is my first team and now I have to spend the next few days picking up the pieces. Guy considered his words. There was something missing. Naruto would not do anything like this unless he was provoked. The kid kept to himself, he hated speaking to other people. Guy had witnessed the genin go to extreme lengths to avoid any sort of conversation. If these kids already had a history, then whatever happened must be worse than Hayama was imagining. He knew Naruto was better than this. Hayama also had a point. This kind of behavior may have been tolerable at the academy, where they could assign extra work or detentions. But Naruto was legally an adult. The moment he had been handed that headband, he was judged by the same standard that all Konoha shinobi were. He could not prank other shinobi out of revenge or malice. There were other ways of resolving conflict. I will speak to Naruto, Guy said gravely. earning twin looks of surprise from his colleagues. I will ensure this does not happen again. Hayama nodded. The anger leaving his frame and weariness replacing it. You also need to speak to your own students, Guy continued. Naruto would not do this unprovoked. They did or said something that I am sure was just as unprofessional. My student is not the only one at fault. Hayama rested his hands on his hips as he tilted his head back. Taking a deep breath and releasing it slowly. I know, he admitted. I'm not naive enough to think that they're innocent. I'll speak to them. He shot them a weak grin and turned, waving goodbye as he exited the building. Guy turned over the conversation in his head, trying to think of the best way to approach this. He had only had his student for 2 months, there was still a lot of work to do in bringing him to the full bloom of his youth. This might set them back. I'll do it. He glanced over at Kakashi. The man's eye still fixed on where Hayama had left. I'll teach him. Guy clasped Kakashi on the shoulder in thanks, before he began walking to the exit himself. The joy from his rival accepting his proposition warred with the concern and sadness that resulted from his talk with Hayama. He needed to find Naruto. Naruto punched the wooden target, following it up with a kick and another punch. Sweat ran down his back as he continued the pattern, the dull ache in his fists beginning to travel up his forearms. He'd been at it for 3 hours now and his mind had zoned out. This was his favorite training exercise, just him and a wooden training post, going through the same movements over and over again. He loved the freedom of it. As all other thoughts emptied from his mind, he could forget the village and the anger and frustration that came with it. The warmth of his muscles and the stretch and strain from the katas kept his mind from wandering completely, so he felt like he was floating. He threw a particularly hard punch, smiling as the pain thrummed up his arm. Naruto-kun. He swung a wide kick into the side of the post, hoping they would go away. Naruto. He threw one final punch, feeling the sharp pain through his fingers as he stepped back from the post. He turned to look at Guy, his chest heaving and the sweat dripping into his eyes. What? Guy-sensei. Guy was uncharacteristically grim, his bright smile missing and his exuberant energy subdued. His thick brows were furrowed into a frown and his arms were crossed. We must discuss your recent actions towards Team 5. Naruto racked his brains. Who were Team 5? He hadn't been present at the team assignments and he hadn't bothered to find out after. The team under Shirakumo Hayama, Guy elaborated. Naruto hoped his blank expression would clue his sensei in. He had no idea who these people were. Guy was unimpressed. Midori, Kichiro and Ren. It clicked. So they're Team 5. He said. I had no idea. It wasn't as if I was there when the teams were assigned. Guy sighed deeply and Naruto eyed him strangely. It was weird dealing with a guy that wasn't smiling and bouncing around and yelling about youth at the top of his lungs. He had found the whole charade annoying until now. Maybe the enthusiasm was better than the stone-faced Jounin he was faced with now. Naruto-kun. You cannot prank your fellow shinobi. I understand it was something you engaged in during your time at the academy. But you are a genin now. It is not youthful to treat your fellow shinobi this way. Who said I pranked them? Naruto asked, feigning surprise. Guy just looked at him and Naruto gave up the innocent act, grumbling about snitches beneath his breath. He should have known one of those cowards would go crawling to one of the adults. I was just letting off some steam. Guy-sensei. I didn't do any harm. Midori will not leave her home and the boys are similarly traumatized. Then maybe they shouldn't be shinobi, Naruto shot back. Frustrated, Guy uncrossed his arms. What did you do? Naruto-kun. I just surprised them. Naruto retorted defensively. They were in one of the forests for some team training exercise and their Jounin wasn't around, so I ambushed them hunged as in. Guy looked at him for a long moment. One of his bushy brows raised. Naruto huffed, expanding on his explanation. I hunged myself and a few clones and dropped on them from above. I let off a few explosion tags and stuff, but I didn't actually hurt them. It's nothing that they wouldn't face on a real mission. Guy remained silent and Naruto kept talking, trying to fill the empty air that his sensei would normally fill. It was unsettling, Naruto knew he would not normally spill so much information, but Guy's silent treatment was more effective than he would have thought. For some reason, the thought of Guy being disappointed in him sat heavily in his gut. He would take the angry yelling of the rest of his teachers any day. Okay. So maybe I threatened to torture and kill them, and one of my clones was hanged as their sensei and was disemboweled and stuff. You said you did not know who Hayama was. I didn't know his name, Naruto huffed. I just knew what he looked like. I saw him running them through katas last week. And the clones? Guy said. I spent the last 2 weeks learning Mizubunjin no Jutsu. Specifically for this prank. Naruto was the silent one now. He didn't think admitting that he snuck into the Chunin section of the library and stole a scroll to learn a clone technique only for the purpose of a prank would go down well. He also decided not to mention the red food dye he had added to the water that made up his clones. It had worked surprisingly well as blood. Guy let out a heavy sigh. The stone facade finally breaking into exasperation. Naruto-kun. While it is impressive that you taught yourself a clone jutsu, you cannot do this again. If you have grievances to bring against your fellow shinobi, you must follow the proper procedures. Raise it with me and I will handle it. Escalating it if need be. Okay. Okay, Naruto raised his hands in surrender. I'll do that next time. It's not as if I knew I could do that. Guy's frown returned. As far as I am aware, they have the system in place at the academy. Yeah. But not for me, Naruto shrugged. Looking away. No one would do anything if people picked on me or wrecked my stuff. So I had to create a deterrent. After the 5th kid ended up with nails in their chair, they started to leave me alone. I'm the Kyuubi brat, the rules have never applied to me. Guy nodded. His expression softening. I promise on the springtime of youth. Naruto-kun. That I will not be like your former instructors. I will be here for you and I will support you. I only ask for your trust. Naruto narrowed his eyes at the Jounin. Guy had been better than any of his other teachers combined, and it had only been 2 months. He was also the most genuine person Naruto had ever met, once you got past the spandex and youth. Guy was reliable and kind. Okay, he nodded slowly. I'll trust you. Something loosened in Naruto's gut as Guy's smile returned. His teeth shining and his demeanor brightening. The man began to talk loudly about his water clones and Naruto relaxed as things went back to normal. Maybe adding one more person to his small circle of precious people wouldn't be so bad. Kakashi loitered at the edge of the training ground. Watching Minato-sensei's son scream expletives at a scuffed and damaged tree. He may have inherited Minato-sensei's bloodline limit, but that temper was all Kusina. He was trying to do the tree walking exercise and he appeared close to reaching the top. My eternal rival. Guy bounced up behind him, throwing an arm around Kakashi's shoulders. I am so happy you could come. You asked me to be here, Kakashi replied quietly. Still watching the genin. He has far too much chakra for his age, Guy answered his unspoken question. His volume lowered. He has been attempting this exercise for 2 months. Kakashi looked at him in surprise. 2 months? Really? He had no chakra control at all when he was first apprenticed to me. Guy removed his arm from Kakashi's shoulders. He has no interest in ninjutsu or genjutsu, that said he learned the water clone technique in less than 2 weeks. Kakashi was going to ask about that, but Guy shoved him forward without warning. Naruto-kun. The blonde turned to them, blue eyes narrowed and face like thunder. It is time to train your bloodline limit. Like the flick of a switch. The anger vanished and he grinned brightly. Kakashi's heart hurt at the sight, he was too much like his parents. Finally. He ran over to meet them. Is this a new teacher or something? Kakashi is one of the finest jounin in the village. Guy laughed. He is my eternal rival. He also has a dojutsu, so he is well equipped to aid you in developing yours. Naruto looked at him with no recognition in his gaze. Kakashi hid his wince and waved a hand half-heartedly. Yeah. Naruto looked at him for a long moment before he turned back to Guy. Are you sure? Guy laughed. Of course. Naruto-kun. There is no one I trust more with your dojutsu training. Naruto shrugged. If you say so. Guy-sensei. Kakashi shook off his thoughts. switching into his professional persona. It might make it easier to deal with Minato-sensei's son. Why don't you tell me what you have figured out? It's all observational as far as I can tell, Naruto began to list. It's great for dodging, keeping track of projectiles, covering blind spots, reading taijutsu moves and people's body language. I can see the smallest movements in muscles, breathing and expressions, so I know when people are lying. My taijutsu is good, I can see moves before they've been made and feints don't work on me. Kakashi considered the genin's words. That lined up with what Minato-sensei could do. It was one of the reasons he was capable of the Hire Shin. Most could not keep up with the processing speed and reaction times of the technique. Minato-sensei's bloodline limit eliminated the difficulties and drawbacks of the technique. So it's mainly taijutsu orientated, Kakashi mused. Pretending that he had no knowledge of the Emperor's eye. No chakra involved. Pretty much, Naruto shrugged. It's basically a shitter taijutsu-based version of the Sharingan. It has some similarities to the Byakugan too as far as the field of vision is concerned. Kakashi frowned. While it did seem like a lesser version of the Sharingan, there was a lot more to the Emperor's eye. He had seen Minato-sensei use it to its full potential and it was an incredible weapon. He hadn't ever seen Minato-sensei taken by surprise or successfully fooled. It always seemed like he was seeing something no one else could, not even Kakashi with Obito's Sharingan. That was without taking into account the zone component of the bloodline limit. It seems like there is more to it, Kakashi started. It also sounds like the stronger the user, the more you will be able to bring out the full strengths of the bloodline limit. Have you tried copying taijutsu moves yet? What? Like the Sharingan? Essentially yes. But you need to stop comparing your dojutsu to the Sharingan. While similar, they are not the same. The Sharingan is capable of a lot. Yes. But there are things that only the Emperor's eye can do. How'd you know what it's called? Naruto asked suspiciously. I didn't tell you and Guy wouldn't have told you. I asked him not to tell anyone. Guy let it slip when he asked for my help, Kakashi lied quickly. Before he cursed at the sight of Naruto's eye flashing silver. Sure. Naruto deadpanned. So what are we doing now? Kakashi let out a breath as Naruto appeared to let the lie go. He definitely caught it. He should probably expect an interrogation sometime in the future. For now, copy Guy's katas as closely as you can. We'll start there.